Hello and welcome to another To It For Media featured interview. I am your host, Jhaka Wooding, and today I am joined by Daniel Fligelstone Davies, lawyer and managing partner at Silk Legal BVI Inc. And today's topic of discussion is the Virgin Islands Magistrates Code of Procedure Amendment Act 2023. We have a lot to discuss. You don't want to miss it.
At Higher BVI, we're not just about business. We're about empowering lives, and that is because we aspire to inspire. By choosing us, you're supporting a company that believes in equal opportunities, diversity, and community growth. Our mission goes beyond profit. It's about providing HR solutions, fostering talent, and leaving a positive impact. Join us in building a better future, a better BVI. Choose Higher BVI, where your support isn't just a transaction, it's a transformation. Together, we're changing lives in these beautiful Virgin Islands.
Welcome back and thank you so much for staying with us. And of course, Daniel, thank you so much for being here. I mean, welcome back to our studio. You're not a stranger.
Well, it's always a pleasure being here. It's been some time since our last interview here.
Yeah.
Yes. And quite a number of developments happened in the country ever since the election.
Absolutely. And of course, you've been very involved with the community. I noticed that you make yourself available to questions through social media all the time. And that's where I found this document and I found your interest in sharing information about it with the public.
Well, yes, it's a very important document because it will fundamentally change our constitutional right to access to justice and access to the court. But I'll leave you to get into that momentarily.
All right. Take me through your concerns in this regard, of course, and what exactly are those changes expected to come should this document be passed to the House of Assembly?
Okay, so for your listening audience, what's being passed is something called the Magistrates Code of Procedure Amendment Act of 2023. It doesn't change the procedures in the Magistrates Court, but it increases fees, and in some instances, those fees surpass the fees that the High Court charges for filing of certain documents. And that is, of course, a major concern. But the concern really is more along the lines that, it's okay to increase the fees, but perhaps not as much as what is being proposed here. Mm-hmm. That is really my take. I understand that we need probably more magistrates, that we perhaps need better facilities for our magistrates, and perhaps a name change to maybe a lower court judge rather than a magistrate, which in many countries is a layperson, or in Jamaica, actually, the term magistrate was replaced by a parish court judge.
Yeah.
And they have parish courts in Jamaica. So I'd really like to see a change along those lines, because their work is very important and it affects everybody's lives. Well, not everybody's, but a lot of people's lives, in terms of knowing that they have access to justice at an affordable rate. Yes.
Of course. And it was very striking for me. Of course, you came ready with documents in hand today, that some of the changes, whereas in this initial set of fees, we see things $1.50, $5, $2.50, mainly the prices go between 50 cents and $5, right?
And it goes up by 100% if the amount claimed is over $100. So, for example, a hearing fee on this is $5. I mean, it's $1.50. If the claim exceeded $100, that means that the hearing fee would in fact be $3 at that stage,
okay.
Right? So that's how we interpret this piece of legislation, or the fee schedule there. Now, the important thing is that not only are fees increased, but they're now charging you for things that they didn't before.
Such as?
For example, a skeleton argument. Now, a skeleton argument is when lawyers reduce what they are saying orally into writing. In other words, they're putting their legal arguments to the court in written form. Mm-hmm. In the High Court, this costs about $10 to $15 But in the magistrate's court, it costs about $40. They'll now charge you $40. They didn't used to charge you before. But if this legislation passes as is, this amendment, then they'll be charging you $40, which is, about $30 to $35 more expensive than what the High Court charges. And recall the fact that matters in the magistrate's court, when it comes to civil claims, breach of contract and so on and so forth, don't exceed $10,000. And so it's a bit strange that you would have more expensive fees when the amounts claimed are indeed lesser. You even have hearing fees here, which you had before, and the hearing fee was $1.50. They're now proposing to increase it to 5% for sums claimed over $5,000. So 5% of the sum claimed once it's about $5,001.
So instead of a set fee, it would really depend on the
amount claimed.
Okay.
Yes, and it's very. My concern is that when people get to realize, well, firstly, people might not realize what they're getting into, because you're not exactly going to have a price list posted on the doors of the magistrate's court. They may file a claim and not realize the amount of money that they're going to have to put up for their claim to be actually heard. And that is a major concern of mine.
All right. Now, of course, a lot of the time when people think of court proceedings, it can easily just go to the back of their mind, like, oh, I don't commit crime. This is not going to affect me. Can you just give us an idea of the real scope of the situation? Because like you mentioned, breach of contract would be something that would head into the magistrate's court. So who exactly is going to be affected?
Well, everyone is going to be affected, or could potentially be affected. So many people don't realize this, but you can actually bring a criminal complaint by yourself to the magistrate's court. It isn't always necessary for the police to do it. And so here we have a proposed fee of $20 for entering or reporting a matter to the magistrate's court. And then another $20 to summon a defendant, and another $20 to summon a witness.
And that's per witness?
Per witness. And on top of that, you have your bailiff's fee for serving it, which is, about $50 and so on and so forth. And so that's on part of the criminal side of things. On the civil side of things, and the reason why it can affect everyone is that, or anyone that is brought before the court, is that you never know what's going to happen in the future. You may agree to loan some money from a friend. Let's say you decided to loan $1,000. Times are hard, you're hit hard, you get fired. The friend or supposed friend brings you to court for their money, and if they win, you're going to have a whole set of extra fees to pay. Or on the other hand, suppose you're the friend or the former friend, and you have to take someone to court because they loaned a substantial amount of money and you really need it back. Before you can even get to the stage of a trial, you have a whole set of different fees that you're going to have to pay. And if you employ a lawyer and the court requires them to put in legal arguments in writing, that's going to be, the cost is going to be enormous.
To my knowledge, well, I'm sure there's a bit more research I could do on the topic, but I was not aware of any consultation done in terms of the development of this bill.
There was.
In your practice, were you part of the consultation?
Yes, about a year or two ago, they sent around the proposed fees. I think I had responded and said that the fees were too much, but it's been quite some time. I would have thought that fresh consultation would be needed over this matter. Of course, opinions change and circumstances change. Right now, you have the House of Assembly is saying that the economy is in a slump. I can't say I disagree with them. And to increase fees payable to the magistrates court by this amount of money, I don't think it's just.
Of course,
not at this stage. Not in the economic situation that we are currently in.
And one of the things you would have mentioned is that you're concerned it may limit people's access to justice because, of course, having the financial ability to pay these fees coming along with this document would be one of those limiting factors.
Yes, because you don't want a situation where people are deterred from going to the court because of the cost associated. And the magistrate's court is supposed to be a court where ordinary people can go without a lawyer. The magistrate will hear both parties and come to a conclusion in a speedy manner. Not that happens very often, but the fact remains that is the intent of the magistrate's court. And so by having these huge fees attached, for example, where on claims of $10,000, just to get the claim started, you have to pay $100, which is higher than the High Court in certain circumstances. In the High Court, the fees that you pay for starting the claim range between $74 and $104, which is, that, come on, it's like you have a limit that the magistrate's court can't go above in terms of awarding, in terms of compensating someone for a breach of contract or a tort such as negligence, which is to say they're limited at $10,000. And so why are you charging someone more money essentially for the High Court for something that's of lesser value? That is a concern. And you asked a question earlier about people saying, oh, this isn't going to affect me, I don't commit crime, I don't get into trouble. Well, I have to say trouble is much like death, because regardless of whether or not you're looking for it, trouble has a way of finding people. Right? So that's what that's my response to that. You don't know what trouble is going to reach you, and you don't have to look for trouble for it to find you.
And of course, it also has a part to play in the sense of community in the BVI, because of course, maybe you may not be directly affected, but your neighbors are affected, your co-workers are affected, people you deal with every day in life. You might not know what your family member might have going on in the court, So it's one of those situations where we're forced to look outside of ourselves for, the greater good.
Now, I understand the fact that, the courts should at least be able to break even. I understand that's what they want to do, but the court should not be seen as a money-making machine or a money-making arm of the government. It is there to provide it is a social tool to ensure that the country is following laws, and in order to prevent a breakdown of society by ensuring that when there is a dispute, there is a place that can determine those disputes in accordance with the law. That is the entire point of having a court. It is a social tool to prevent the breakdown of society. By increasing fees so dramatically to a point where many people will not be able to afford to go to court, one can only imagine what the potential consequences are of that. And people already don't like to go to court in the first place. This is just going to deter them even further. And unfortunately, that may lead to people taking matters into their own hands. If they can't get justice because of the court being too expensive, then they're going to look at alternative means. That's just how people operate.
It's one of the things we've been seeing recently as well, people being vocal in expressing their frustration with not getting justice, feeling like their cases aren't being handled. And I know across the Caribbean, across the world, the speed at which things are done in the legal system, it's always a matter of contention for members of the public, but putting this somewhat barrier, I would say, to people even entering the process would exacerbate the situation.
I think you're absolutely right. That aside, I would like very much that rather than the House of Assembly and the government constantly trying to raise fees, raise prices on certain services, that they look at the service being offered and to see how they can improve the service being offered. Not just say, oh, I'm now going to charge you this, this, and this for these things.
So
and
instead
not
it's a
offer
matter of value for money?
Yes, essentially, because the Magistrate's Code of Procedure could do with quite a bit of amending in terms of making certain procedures easier to follow, making it easier to start certain claims. And an example is that in the High Court, if you have a claim, you can serve someone with the legal documents outside of the jurisdiction if they don't live in, if they're not a regular resident jurisdiction, or they're overseas living or whatever have you, or they're out for a very long time. If you know where that person is, you can serve that person overseas. You can't do that in the Magistrate's Court. It has to be within the jurisdiction, as far as I'm aware. And the problem is with that is that means that someone who, let's say, has someone that owes $8,000 can just run off wherever they want to be and avoid service. What service actually is, for the listening audience, that's simply a term which means receiving legal documents, receiving the documents that start the process of starting a claim, or it doesn't start the process of starting a claim. It is part of the process of receiving legal documents. Okay. That is what that's what service basically means. So someone can avoid receiving magistrate court summons if they're overseas, you see. And they stay there for a long period of time. Sometimes people forget about it, things just go by the wayside. But if we had a provision in the Magistrate's Code of Procedure which allowed us to now serve these people overseas, that would be of great benefit to people.
And of course, that would be a case of value for money.
Yes.
Adding to the fees, and of course, that might be a fee that would cost additional, an additional sum of money. Now, of course, I saw that you did express your concerns on social media, and I know you to be someone who doesn't only come with an issue, you often come with solutions as well. So what recommendations would you like to make in this regard?
Well, I didn't really express any concerns, so to speak. I just posted it for the public consumption, so that they can take a look at it, so that they can know what is going on with respect to an institution that is key to the operation of our society here in the Virgin Islands. My recommendation is consult with the people, do a cost-benefit analysis, see what the people can actually afford, and come to the people with what exactly your aim is with increasing these fees. What is the object? Is it in fact to deter people from coming to the court? Are you getting too much frivolous cases? Is that why you feel the need to increase the fees so much? But we need to know. We don't know what the motivation is behind raising these fees. Because the fact of the matter is that we don't know. The public doesn't have any idea as to how much it costs to run the court. So I would think that the public would have a legitimate expectation. And I use that term very loosely, not in the legal sense, but, would have an expectation that they can be consulted, that they can be informed for all the facts surrounding this before a decision is in fact made. And I think that's true for any piece of legislation that they wish to pass. Perhaps not so much of financial services legislation, which is very specialized.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, I would think that is an approach that should be taken.
So, of course, consultation.
Informed consultation.
Informed consultation.
Just don't fling a document in front of me and ask me what I think about it. Give me the pros, the cons, what your objectives are. so we can come to a amicable solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Of course, because people can only have a proper way in on a situation, on a document, on a development when they are armed with the necessary information and understanding for what they're agreeing to.
Yes.
You know, I saw this thing on, I think it was on TikTok, where there's this sound and someone taught their dog how to shake hands. And his concern is that he often doesn't know what he's shaking to. And I feel like that's the situation a lot of us end up in when we're agreeing to things, signing contracts without reading, agreeing to terms and conditions, to
Yes.
opening a new account without reading them. And of course, that's the role that you're somewhat playing for the community right now, ensuring that persons have access to these documents and that these things aren't just happening on the wayside.
Well, and that's part of the problem with our lawmaking process, is that we just have things gazetted, and nobody goes onto the Gazette but lawyers and accountants and liquidators of companies. You know, that's really in the realm of professional people in the financial services industry,
But
or
it
the
is
legal
open to the
services industry.
public.
It's open to the public, but you know, people in the legal services and financial services are the ones that most frequent the Gazette website and are most interested in it, in its contents, that is. I really think that the government should have a policy of ensuring that proposed pieces of legislation are circulated in a local newspaper and local news outlet.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a newspaper, but I would expect at least, you know, for example, 284 Media has a website. It can have a section for proposed bills or proposed legislation, I should say, that the government can advertise on 284 Media, of course, for a fee, but because, you know, nothing these days is free, but just so that the public are aware of what's going on.
Yeah, of course. Now, thank you so much for taking the time today to explain this document to me. I did express to you over the phone that I do not in any way claim to be someone who understands legal jargon or someone who can pick up one of these documents and fully understand it. And I think in that way, I represent a large section of the community who wants to know what's going on, but isn't necessarily armed with those tools. So that's where you come in. Is there any other area of the Magistrate's Court procedure that you believe can be bolstered to better the operation of the court? Because earlier you did mention that serving persons overseas was one of them, and that bolstering the operations of the court could be a justification for seeking to add additional fees.
Yeah, so I think that the limit of $10,000 needs to be lifted to $25,000. They have it like that in the Cayman Islands, I believe.
Okay.
And the Caymanian dollar is actually worth more than a US dollar. So I would suggest raising the limit to $25,000 and increasing the amount of costs that a person can recover. So what are costs? Costs are essentially the expenses that one expends to litigate their case, and can include lawyer fees, or does include lawyers' fees. So currently the limit is $2,000, but with all of these fees, you know, plus lawyers' fees, you know, people are going to be seriously out of pocket litigating these matters if they choose to have a lawyer, and it is advisable to have a lawyer. Even if you're a lawyer, it's advisable to have a lawyer, because a lawyer who has himself as a client has a fool for a client. That is that's a very common saying that we have among ourselves. So yes, lifting the limit to about $25,000 is certainly something that I can I can see being of great benefit to the people of the Virgin Islands. Perhaps this thing as well, not having to pay $20 for an affidavit.
Okay.
That's what the High Court charges. Your Magistrate's Court. You're supposed to be you're not supposed to be as expensive as the High Court. You're of a lower level, as it were. Shouldn't be that expensive. But generally, that's my thought for now. I think it can do with. I think it should have a bit more. The rules of the Magistrates' Court should be set out much more clearly. They have some rules, the Magistrates' Code of Procedure rules, but it's absolutely lacking. It's absolutely lacking. It's very simple, not very substantive. It's best that you have rules so people know what is going to happen, and what. It's best to have rules so that people know what's going to happen, what to expect. What's going to happen at different stages of the procedure.
They're more informed coming into the process.
So essentially, that is what I'm looking for as well. More defined rules of the Magistrates' Court. Of particular concern is when it comes to Magistrates' Court and criminal prosecutions, whereby prosecutors come very late with their legal submissions. Sometimes I've experienced recently the magistrate gave the prosecution up until the 27th of September to file certain submissions. We got them a month later.
Oh.
And of course, there's no sanctions attached to that. And I really think that, for late filings, that there should be some sort of sanction when it comes to the criminal sphere. Because, you have people's life, whether or not someone's on bail or they're on remand, you have their life on pause. Oftentimes, these people can't travel freely, because they have reporting conditions attached to the bail, or if they're on remand, they're in the jailhouse in Balsam Gut for quite some time.
You did comment on that as well recently.
Yeah.
The situation regarding remand at the prison. And I recall last year, and I believe this year, a list came out as well, where the BVI is ranked amongst the highest for persons incarcerated per capita.
Yes.
And of course, that has a lot to do with the territory's small population, but as well, because the prison population, a majority of persons there are on remand. Yes.
Remember, Anguilla, I think, is smaller than us.
Yeah.
I don't think that they rank anywhere near as high.
Being on the list, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So there's a lot of things that need fixing with our court system. But on the bail, on the path when it comes to people doing things in a timely manner, lawyers and legal practitioners doing things in a timely manner, that needs to be adhered to, because you can't have people's lives on pause for years upon years, or even months. Even having someone's life on pause for months is bad enough. Much less years and years. And so I would like to see more defined rules of court for the Magistrates' Court. Yes.
All right. Now, I think we've come to the end of our interview.
Yes.
You've shared a lot. I just want to give you a chance if you have any final words you'd like to share right now.
Well, I'd just like to thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to be here. And, everyone's free to reach out to me if they want clarification on certain things that I may have missed or have said that you're not absolutely clear on. When you think it's clear as mud, then you can call me. So yeah, that's it. And thank you for having me once again.
All right. It was great having you. I see in the future having you here again.
Yes.
Should I bump up upon any legal documentation that we need to break down for the public?
Yes, and I'd really like to see a much more involved legal profession here in the Virgin Islands with respect to explaining certain things that are coming. A much more active legal profession when it comes to explaining things to the public. So it's not just myself and one or two other lawyers about the place, trying to bring things and flag things to the public's attention. This should be part of our duty, I think.
Sort of corporate social responsibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And of course, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to 284 Media for more great content.